Hello, everybody. Welcome to Irongeek Cast number 183. When the hell is Israel coming back? I'm pretty sure that was Trez's idea. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
Other than people fucking with me online because they have fucked up belief systems and they automatically believe crazy people without much evidence, or they're just really sensitive about shit. Oh, dude. I'm tired of people. How do you put this way? I don't think you should go to a conference if you can't watch Blazing Saddles and free Dave Chappelle shows back to back.
Frankly,
that's the cock. You have to be able to do that.
I don't really understand the argument that only certain people matter more to attend conferences than others. You're talking about alienating a certain demographic from attending your conference. In order to do that, you need to alienate another demographic to make sure they leave the conference.
Yeah, exactly. But also, you have people you disagree with them, and like, I'm physically scared now that I was disagreed with online. It's so whiny.
It is.
I think as we get more and more younger people, there's some older people are also like that. So we get more and more younger people in who have been indoctrinated in certain ways. I think we're going to have more problems with that.
I honestly, how do I put this? I don't really know the percentage of young people are like this. We obviously see a good concentration of it in tech, in certain internet, in certain cultures that are very internet heavy. But across the entire nation, I always try to keep in mind that it's very possible we're just seeing a tiny slice out of the entirety of everything. So I don't want to make the assumption that this is representative of an entire generation as opposed to an entire generation filtered through Tumblr and Twitter.
Yeah, it is true. Twitter skews a certain way, let's say. But we actually have Trez here. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing well. Can't really complain too much. Built a new machine yesterday for virtualization. Nice rig. It's rocking AMD Ryzen 9. It's got 12 cores and like 64 gigs of RAM and 4 terabyte hard drives.
And here I am just disappointed. I just built a new rig, and everything you quoted, I have half of. I have an AMD 7 3700, 16 gigs of RAM, 2 terabyte drives.
Nice. Well, mine is specifically for virtualization for work shit, so I'm going to write off of my taxes. But it's like I need to test out shit, and I can't use the rig in the office because I need to be able to grab some PCAPs. Not grab some PCAPs. I need to be able to have span traffic, and the one in the office is hooked up in a way that it can grab span. This one I have it hooked up in my laundry room where my router is, so that it can grab some span traffic.
Yeah.
So I need to be able to virtualize and shit.
I finally have a setup that can handle 200 tabs simultaneously without any lag whatsoever.
Shit.
Nice.
I just have a MacBook, which obviously I didn't build. 32 gigs of RAM and 2 terabyte hard drive.
I'm really enjoying these M2 drives. I clearly was IO bottleneck before. Unfortunately, with the QLC drives,
what's this?
What?
Sorry, Busted Sec is adding something else to the stream. What is that?
Right now it's just the show notes, but I want to be able to use them when we start going.
All right, but does it need to be on a stream, or do we do that on a screen share?
Oh, we can.
Oh, I see what you know. Never mind. I'm mistaken as a different type of ad. Yeah, that's good.
And I can do this and make it look real cool. There we go.
It's harder to read the text that way.
Who needs to read the text?
I mean, in that case, one or the other. Choose one or the other.
Or I can make this really, really big if I can figure out how to resize this shit over here.
Control mouse wheel forward.
No. There's mode. Full screen. Yeah, crap. I give up. It's stupid, and it's not going to work. Why can't it just word? Adrian, how do you make this bigger?
It's not like a control PPPP plus, you know.
Yeah, let's see how that works.
I was gonna say, control mouse wheel forward does the same thing.
It's good enough. You can read that.
Yes, you can read
So
that.
mine is command plus, but on yours it's probably gonna be something like control plus.
Yeah, I've been taking time off on Twitter, and I'll probably take time off again. I got an argument with God, got from Godwin from Godwin's Law, and it's like Twitter is utter crap. It turns the most mild disagreements into something you need to insult people over and block.
I saw a pretty good Twitter argument today. It was screen caps, and it was somebody trying to report a vulnerability to some app where it's some kind of feminist app, and
Giggle.
Yeah, I posted it in the chat.
So yeah, Giggle.
Yeah, Giggle.
Breathing into the microphone.
That did not go well. It's like we have our own security team. We don't need your help. Thank you very much. Like that's gonna end well.
Yeah, but it's also one of those things where I'm happy not getting involved in that kind of stuff. I mean, a shitstorm's going to happen regardless. Why stick my dick in the middle of that shit?
Right. I actually have a whole identity I use for doing disclosures when I find shit. Like it's a whole nother personality made up in another country with its own avatar and fake name and fake picture and everything. And that way, when I report, they say we're going to sue you. Somebody's breathing into the mic too much. You sound like Darth Vader. That way, when I report shit and they say we're going to sue you, they can go try and sue somebody who doesn't exist.
Assuming they don't do enough discovery to find you.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really hard because that identity it's contained. It's completely self-contained. It's in even when I access it, I use a virtual machine, and that virtual machine has got its own VPN connection, and it's always outside the country. So it's like, yeah, they're not gonna. There's nothing that ties me to that.
All right.
So I keep getting knocked offline for some reason.
I thought I got knocked off briefly.
Better than getting knocked up.
Yeah. So I've been taking time off Twitter. I'm going to take time off again. Probably it's. I don't see much of an upside, and it's just constant stress. I don't need to see someone else who is responsible for, what I enjoyed in my childhood shitting on me. So it's like, fuck it. I don't need this kind of heartbreak.
Yeah. I have OCD about exact words people use, and it also really pisses me off when people start running with shit without knowing what the fuck's going on.
But nobody ever knows what the fuck's going on. They just jump into the argument and throw in their 2 cents, and it's like they might not even read the whole freaking thing of what's going on. They just want to add to the shit.
I mean, if you're scrolling through your timeline, you see a tweet. Your instinct is to respond to that tweet, not okay. Here's a tweet. Let me make sure to follow every one of the several dozen different Twitter threads that spawn from this, so I have the full context before I respond.
I'm fairly OCD though, so I do.
I most definitely do not. Whenever I use Twitter, I see a tweet in my timeline, unless it is self-evident from that one tweet that there was missing context, I respond to that tweet, and I have paid the price multiple times for that. And I have not yet learned my lesson.
Yeah, so I'm testing out this theory, trying to get Security Onion to work properly. Because right now, if you have a tunnel interface, the program will not install properly. But I want to be able to have my I want to have one guy in the cloud that's going to be like the manager node, and then I'm going to have my sensor that's going to be on site that's going to be shooting logs up to the manager node, and they're going to be on separate networks. So for one machine to talk to the other, if you have this VPN adapter, the TUN0 interface installed, it will not run, right? It won't work. So I'm testing this theory where I'm going to have a second box that I'm going to offload the VPN connection to, and I'm going to use some masquerading with IP tables so that it can act as the gateway, and have the first box on a private network talk to the second box, and the second box is the gateway communicate up to the VPN tunnel, and then essentially I'm going to wrap that whole connection around like that. So it looks like this if I can put it up here. So that's like trying to get it to work right. So I'm building that out, and if it works, it's going to be really cool. And if it doesn't, I'm going to have wasted a lot of time and money. All right. Thanks for the feedback. Anyway, moving forward, what else is going on with you guys?
Not much.
Not much.
Well,
I already described.
I'm sad. I missed my yearly ritual of Vegas and tiki bars. But I'm kind of shocked the sheer amount of money you've spent on travel and conferences. Now that I'm not spending that, I need to stop. Maybe I just need to go to less conferences in general once this all is done. Because holy crap!
Yeah, I mean, it's worthwhile because it's kind of like your socialization budget, you know.
It absolutely has been, yes.
Yeah, I miss the conferences too. It's a lot of fun, you know. Even when you're absolutely nuts at a conference and lose a whole bunch of friends, it's still fun to be able to go to the conferences.
I know a lot of people say like they don't like Vegas for DEF CON. I've gone to so many conferences, so not as many as Adrian. I've gone to so many conferences, I start looking at them in terms of what's unique about them. And I have not been to any conference that is remotely like DEF CON.
DEF CON is definitely one of a kind. In terms of conferences, there's really nothing else like it. It's the biggest one. It's kind of like the standard.
It's not just the size. It's the wealth of miniature conferences that spawn from it. And while a lot of conferences try to borrow the aesthetic, not very few go any remotely as far as DEF CON does. And I don't know. I just really enjoy the atmosphere. I may not feel the same way if I had started before. If I had started before DEF CON 15 when it was a lot more wild. I unfortunately started in DEF CON 21.
Gotcha.
I think 17 was my first one, and it was maybe more wild than it got later on. I kind of like the wild.
DEF CON 15, I hear, is when it was the most wild.
Yeah. 22 was pretty wild, too. Right. So, according to the show notes this week, we've actually got a bunch of shit to talk about. And I really didn't organize these like I normally do. They're just kind of all stuck together as far as, like all the different news and various shit that I put in here. So there's not going to be any good segues between one story to the next like I normally try and set up. But still got lots of fun shit. And we start off with a picture of a somewhat pretty girl for some reason in an ARM exploit mitigation. I guess she found it. I don't know. No, she's founder of Azeria Labs. Good for her. All right. So ARM exploits, right? If you know what ARM is, it's an architecture. It's what probably drives your phone. And Raspberry Pis run on ARM architecture. So this is an exploit. It's actually 20 different vulnerabilities that were found in a smart home hub. So a lot of people nowadays, they have smart homes, various different devices, and the hub is kind of what enables the communication between those different devices that all work on different protocols and talk different languages. So being able to compromise the hub gives you access to all that shit. So there are some memory corruption vulnerabilities they found. And they go on, talk a little bit about all this shit. And talk about mitigations as well. So if you're interested in ARM shit, this would be a good article for you to take a look at. If not, then don't bother. Moving forward, this article I think is really cool and scary and 1984-ish. And if it loads, that would be even great. I'm clicking it, nothing's happening. Man, I got too many freaking things happening here. All right, this is the article here. So let's just copy this shit and pop it up here since it's not working. All right. So, all right. Say there was a crime in your neighborhood, right? And the cops don't know who committed it, and they have no suspects. what they can do now is they can go to Google and Apple and say, give me all the people who were in this area at this time. And they can do this without a warrant. And then Google and Apple will turn over the information of all the people whose phones had GeoIP coordinates.
Yes, the reverse warrant.
I'm gonna turn that off. What the hell? Why?
Hey, stop watching porn in the background.
That's no. It picked on something. A Google Home device picked up on something you said.
Yeah, it's a reverse warrant. Like, I've been hearing a lot about those for about a year now. I remember. Actually, you go ahead and read it. I don't want to more.
Oh, sure. So in 2018, a 23-year-old named George Molina, he was arrested and jailed for 6 days on suspicion of killing another man. Police in Arizona, about 20 miles from Phoenix, they held him for questioning. And according to the police report, officers told him he knew 100% without a doubt that his phone was at the scene of the crime based on data sent given to them by Google. In fact, Molina wasn't there. He had simply lent an old phone to the man police later arrested. The phone was still signed into his Google account. The information about his phone came from a geofence warrant, a relatively new thing, right? Geofence warrants work in reverse. Police start with a time and location and then request data from Google and Apple and other companies, and then they do their investigation based on the data that they get. So critics say this process is definitely an invasion of privacy, and I tend to agree. It's also probably why you should turn location services off on your phone when you're not using them, even though your phone will probably turn them back on without realizing it. And they say it's unconstitutional search, right? It's an invasion of privacy, unconstitutional search. 2 judges have denied requests for geofencing warrants and questioned whether they complied with Fourth Amendment protections, right? Protections for searches. And activists and lawmakers, they're all trying to get the practice banned. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And it's clearly a fishing expedition that violates people's constitutional rights. It goes on. There was another story like this a while back where somebody was riding their bike near the place where there was a crime that happened, and they had rode their bike back and forth a few times, and that was enough information for the cops to pick them up and keep them for a few weeks in jail while they investigated whether or not that was the actual person who committed the crime, when this person had nothing to do with it. He was just riding his bike in the area, and he had to hire a lawyer and all that shit to be able to get out of jail. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. They can just ping your phone. Well, they can talk to Google and be like, hey, we need everybody who is over at Central Park from this area to this area from this time period, and they get all that info, and then they conduct an investigation. It's creepy, man. It's 1984 type shit.
So a couple more to the story. Do not, under any circumstances, assume law enforcement will treat new technology with care and prudence. They will go balls to the walls. They will make assumptions. They will make mistakes, and you will pay the price until the courts eventually tamp down on that.
Yeah, so, when the courts catch up with the technology.
Yes. Other stuff is, I recall one of the arguments used about why this is not kosher is reference to an old Supreme Court precedent where, I believe from the 60s or 70s, where police were told just because they are looking for someone inside of a bar and want to question the bartender does not give them the right to detain and question everyone who is physically in the bar at the time. They don't get a warrant to question everyone in a vicinity of an area. They get a warrant to question specific individuals. So take that to this kind of logic, take that to geofence warrants. Some judges are saying, no, you are getting information of thousands of people across a several months time or several week time frame. You are ensnaring you're saying thousands of innocents without any reason to believe they were involved. This is not even vaguely particular with regards to who you are actually trying to monitor.
Yeah, it's like the very definition of a fishing expedition. That's what it is,
You're treating thousands of people as potential suspects and as guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
And to kind of elaborate based upon that, with a search warrant, the idea is that you are targeting a specific individual based upon reasonable articulable suspicion, and that basically has to meet certain criteria as to how you're coming up to that, why you think that person is that, etc. And without that, a judge kind of go, yeah, no, fuck you, it's too broad, or at least they're supposed to.
Correct.
Trez, I know you like that effect, but can you just turn it off?
Sure.
It's kind of distracting.
And that's the whole point, is to engage the people watching the cast, unless they don't like it. Yeah.
Anyway. Ask people, do you like it or you not like it? So tell us in the chat.
Yeah, in the YouTube chat, if you're here. Yeah, I actually had somebody ask me a question about last week's cast on Twitter, which it's like, oh, somebody actually watches the cast. That's excellent. They're like, what was that book you recommended? I'm like, oh, yeah. Very good. People actually watch the cast. All right. Let me just pull up the YouTube cast here, and now it's going to play it, and we're going to have feedback. It's going to be great. All right. Live beef, Nathan Hoff. Have a great cast, everyone. None of that. All right. So nobody in the chat is talking about it. So
someone please move the microphone a little further from you're breathing on.
Got some Darth Vader shit going on. All right. So next article, next thing. Somebody sent me this on Facebook. They are like, hey, you're an InfoSec. Well, they said cybersecurity, same shit. And they're like, what do you think of this? And I took a look at this, and my first instinct is this is just a horrible, horrible idea. So it's a decentralized VPN and firewall for life. What is it really? It is a little appliance, right? And it talks about how it will connect you to a decentralized private network. You'll be VPN'd into it. There are no monthly fees. But when you look deeper, it's going to be resharing your internet connection with everybody who is connected to this thing. So essentially, you are becoming the equivalent of a Tor exit node. So
isn't this exactly like that Israeli? There was a VPN service that was free a while back in the news. News house in Israel got in the news because people were tampering with the connection activity from others. As in, if you are a exit node, you can modify unencrypted traffic.
Right. Well, talking with an exit node, I mean, I think a lot of people who set up exit nodes do it intentionally so they can accomplish it. Like they will set up an exit node, and then anybody who makes a request to use like a coin mixer, they will replace the address that they are sending the coins to, and that way they get the money instead of the person they're sending it to. It's like
reminds me of an Medium article recently read about Tor exit nodes. Apparently, there is a big issue with a bit of a crime ring, where about a third of all Tor exit nodes was clearly being run by a single entity, not likely a state-backed entity. It was an entity that was primarily intercepting anything related to crypto coin mining. Any unencrypted traffic, it was injecting coin miner links to anything that they could see was a reference to a Bitcoin wallet ID. They were turning something out and replacing it with their own Bitcoin wallet ID. But yeah, I think it was impressive because of the scope of it. A third of all exit nodes just from some random criminal enterprise.
Uh-huh.
And after it got taken down, they brought it back up within a few weeks. By taken down, I mean after Tor blocked those exit nodes, they came back within several weeks. So
it's crazy, man.
It's just the implication that if it's like random criminal enterprise, a third of exit nodes. How many exit nodes do you think is not run by either a state enterprise or a criminal enterprise at this point?
Right. I mean, it's really scary when you think about the people running the exit nodes can see what you're doing, right? And if they can see what you're doing, they can also fuck with what you're doing. So,
it's a lot less of a concern than it used to be, given the post-Snowden push towards encrypting web traffic.
Right. I mean, but even if your shit's encrypted over Tor, right, you're not going to be using the regular certificates. They're going to be re-signed certificates from some third party, and you can't really trust those.
Oh yeah, I do recall also for those malicious Tor exit nodes. Apparently, they were also attempting SSL downgrade attacks.
Yeah. Essentially using man-in-the-middle proxy, or SSL strip. Same shit.
They were attempting SSL strip.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, it's nuts. But I mean, that's what you deal with shit like Tor. I mean, yeah, it's anonymous and shit, but that also have to deal with people can fuck with it. Just like anything where you're routing your traffic through multiple hops and you don't control those hops. I mean, there's the ability for people to fuck with shit in between.
Yeah, well, I'm a lot less concerned than others would be because so much traffic is encrypted. If you are really worried about getting popped and your traffic being redirected to a non-Tor node, using Tails helps, or have a separate firewall that makes sure that you only have traffic allowed to I forget what it's called, entry guards. Whatever the initial point is you connect to when you're initiating a Tor connection.
Right.
As long as you're only connecting to those, you probably will be safe from some degree of attacks aimed at unmasking you.
Right, and you should probably not just use Tor browser bundle on Windows, but maybe set up Unix gateway and server, and that way you've got kind of a hop in between. So you got your machine, which is the server. Well, yeah, you got your machine, which is the client, right? And then it connects to another machine, which is acting as kind of a server. And there's an encrypted connection between these two, and then the server goes out to Tor and grabs the data and then passes it back to the client. So it's like another layer of security in between, so it's not straight on Tor. It's cool. It's a cool idea, networking wise. Yeah. Oh, I was looking that up. Unix gateway. That's not how you spell gateway. Anyway, yeah. So this is Unix. It's pretty cool. You can run it in VirtualBox or any hypervisor. So you can just kind of import it in there. It's 2 separate VMs. Yeah, it's neat. You got a shitty little GUI here running on XFCE, and you launch your web browser, and then from there you go in and you do your web surfing, and it's all kind of safe and secure, or at least more secure. Anyway, that's just my push for the week of software. Next, we've got the service NSW, right? They have leaked a whole shit ton of data. It was stolen during an email breach. So email breaches are fun because reasons. So 47 staff accounts, right? They got access to these email accounts, and then from there they dumped the entire contents of the mailboxes, which all in all included 47 staff members and 186,000 customer records that they know of. There's probably even more shit in there. I mean, if you look at the stuff people email out, there could be all sorts of stuff, privileged information. So if you don't know who NSW is, they are a company that does stuff. And I don't know what the fuck stuff they do, but they do things. NSW database. What the hell is NSW? It doesn't really say. Regardless, they were compromised, and their emails were shared, and yada yada yada. I guess they're Australian because it talks about New South Wales government. NSW. That makes sense. All right, so yeah, it was a government agency in Australia, New South Wales. Yep. I was wondering what NSW stood for. I probably should have looked into that before reading the article. Next one we've got is if you're running the built-in hypervisor on a Windows machine, right? then there's some really easy privilege escalation for a hacker who might get on your box and is looking to elevate privileges, where they can essentially become admin with very little effort. So there's this guy, Jonas, and I can't pronounce his last name, but I'm going to give it a shot. Likegard. All right. So say you got HyperV on a box, right? HyperV is Windows hypervisor that you can turn on. That's free and it sucks. And if you're going to be using Docker on Windows, it's going to be enabled. If you're going to be using some sandbox software on Windows, it's going to be enabled by default. And you can also turn it on manually if you go in and you turn on Windows Sandbox over here, it turns it on. One shitty thing about this hypervisor is if you're running it, you can't run any other hypervisor on your box. So say you want to run VMware, right? And you've got HyperV installed. You cannot get VirtualBox or VMware Workstation to start up because it will complain that the HyperV, the system for HyperV, I don't know what the hell it's called, the virtualization subsystem probably, is locked and you can't use it.
So, I mean, how often do you run virtual machines for across different virtualization platforms in the same system?
I do, because I get VMs from all over the place, and then I gotta either import them into Workstation or ESX or put them in VirtualBox or.
I guess if you have a bunch of extra resources to just run a separate virtualization system, then sure.
Yeah, if you got lots of money and lots of machines, yeah. But most people, they want to run. So I see the use case for this being like, say you want to run that Windows Sandbox thing, right? So you can test out some maybe questionable software, kind of do like a cuckoo sandbox type shit, right? If you're running that and then you want to run something with VMware Workstation or one of the other hypervisors, it will not run on your system. It's locked. But if you want to use, say, VirtualBox and VMware, you can use both of those on the same system, but you can't run HyperV and VirtualBox on the same system. That's just an annoyance. You can always do nested virtualization, where you set up a Windows VM that then has the virtualizer. Bleh. Can't speak today. Essentially, the Windows box would be virtualized and then do nested virtualization within it. You can do it.
I remember a decade ago, the common wisdom was you can't have VMware running inside VMware, but apparently, if you configured it right, you actually could. Performance was just utter crap, but I know it's been a decade. You think they've changed?
Oh, nested virtualization is definitely a thing. A lot of servers that do KVM online natively, they have people then running ESXi on top of KVM, which I don't know why you do that because anyway, it happens. So it's happening more often than not nowadays. And then you've got, somebody running like KVM where they're running ESXi on top of KVM. And then underneath that, they've got a whole shit ton of Docker stuff. And it's like, oh, yeah, virtualize on top of containers, all sorts of shit. Long story short with this article, because I got way off topic, is that if you're running HyperV, there's a vulnerability this guy found that will allow you to do privilege escalation on the Windows system and get an admin level shell with very, very little effort. And it has to do with this storage virtualization service provider's HyperV component right here. It hasn't been patched yet. And so the guy who found it said, send some donations to one laptop per child rather than giving me like a bug bounty or something, which is nice, rather than a bug bounty. Nice way to give back. Next, we've got a Chilean bank that has been hit with ransomware because this happens everywhere now. And even banks are getting hit with ransomware, which when you think about how, you'd think a bank's network would be very, very secure and maybe not even have internet access at a location. No, they
no one thinks that. No one thinks that. It's a bank. They have Windows XP on their ATMs.
All right. Well, that's because it's XP embedded, and it's still got updates from Microsoft because they're paying like $1,000 a machine a year to continue to get Windows XP embedded updates, rather than just install something new. So their branches will not be operational and remain closed today. They launched on Twitter. They're letting everybody know, hey, we're kind of out of business right now, temporarily because of ransomware. And it goes on to talk about how the bank, its website, its banking portal, the mobile apps, and the ATM network were not impacted thanks to a good design, but everything else was encrypted. So, yeah, I mean, shit happens. Banks get hit. Everybody gets hit. This one's a big deal, I think, this next one. And if you work for a company that does cybersecurity type stuff, especially something like SOC as a service or any kind of monitoring, this is a really good one for you because they're saying now in the future, CEOs of companies could be held personally liable for cyber attacks that kill. So as an IT guy, right, you're going to run into a lot of shit that can hurt your networks, right? Your computers, but very rarely is it something bad enough where it can kill somebody, right? But you never know if, you have a critical system that you're running and it goes down because you were stupid and didn't patch your Windows shit and then you got ransomware and then somebody died somehow as a result of that. They're actually saying, hey, the IT administrators can be held liable, right? Just, it's negligence at that point. So it's mostly dealing with critical infrastructure, like healthcare stuff, but also with the expansion of 5G, there's things like connected cars and telehealth and remote surgery, and all these things are heavily reliant on the internet, and because of that, they are open to bad shit happening.
And as things become more and more connected too, you may not face just accidental problems, but intentional ones. I mean, I've seen examples in lots of media where, some bad actor will hack into a medical device, something like that, and use it to kill a person. And right. I mean, that's science fiction now, but it's on the verge of becoming science fact.
I don't know. Have you seen some of the stuff at like the biohacking village at DEF CON?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen stuff where they'll hack into like we see there's an insulin pump that can actually be triggered to release insulin, and that's actually a case of where you could actually kill someone with that because too much insulin in the body will cause a coma. So
right.
you could.
There's another one with a pacemaker where you can essentially ping of death it, and what you do is you just keep sending connection requests over and over again, and it drains the shit out of the battery, and the pacemaker just dies.
Yeah, I mean, there's one classic example from a game called Hacknet where you actually hack into a person's pacemaker that's on the internet, and you upload a testing firmware to it, and that triggers a cardiac arrest. And it's actually kind of creepy because you actually watch the output from it live. You actually see the person's heart rate stop. It's like you get this real feeling of, oh fuck, I just killed someone virtually. It's like, over the internet. It's like,
well, I mean, these days, medical devices. I'm familiar with something called a Merlin at home, which is sort of like an intermediary device between, let's say, your pacemaker or your insulin pump and the internet. So you'd be hacking an intermediary device to do stuff to your pacemaker, which would. It's in and of itself. If you're on the metro, you're probably not going to be on the internet. It's when you go home and are doing maintenance.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it does kind of make sense. Like,
it's like a gateway thing,
yeah, because of just addressing space limitations. But if we start actually seeing, IPv6 becoming a thing,
it's not that. It's practical considerations.
Well,
like
yeah, too.
A battery, You're not always going to have a cell phone connection, privacy. I can see the utility in the sense of if you are having a cardiac event, you can have it would be useful to have an emergency signal go out to warn a hospital. But aside from that, what use would you have to have a constantly internet connected pump?
I mean, again, this is a case of where it's mostly science fiction now, but give it a few years. We are seeing advances in battery technology. We are seeing more and more devices becoming constantly connected via 3G or other telco signals.
Yeah, there's all sorts of shit that really doesn't need to be online that is. I mean, there's internet-connected ice trays. Who the hell needs an internet-connected ice tray? Well,
I mean, there's an internet-connected Barbie or teddy bear.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Is these things are becoming more and more connected. Of questionable use, but I mean, there is a definite case to be made for
what do you mean questionable use? They collect analytics that can be sold.
Yes,
of course, they use for the person selling the product. They will get more money from a constant revenue stream.
Oh yes, I mean there's a business use there, but I mean you could obviously make a practical use case for a internet connected medical device, but again. We see what medical devices are built with, who's programming it, lowest common bidder. So
I'm more concerned about. Well, I recently saw a pregnancy test that was hacked to play a Rickroll.
Oh, or Doom. You're gonna play Doom, yeah.
I haven't seen the one that was hacked to play Doom, but how long is it going to be until it's going to be standard to have some sort of internet-connected pregnancy test? And the results of the pregnancy test are just going to be beamed out to marketers.
Yep.
So, like, the moment you're pregnant,
well, shit. We're getting beyond that. Remember, there was a case where Target actually predicted a woman was pregnant before she even knew because of her buying habits.
Yes,
they actually figured that out. Like that was like 10 years ago.
Oh, I remember that story. I think it was a few months into her pregnancy, but it's. I mean, it was creepy in and of itself. Yes, I'm just thinking the internet pregnancy test would be a bit more creepy.
Wow, I actually haven't seen the video of that, Trez. That is ridiculously.
That's the same pregnancy test.
That's ridiculously high fidelity. Holy shit! And I don't mean that sarcastically. That is a ridiculously high fidelity for a fucking pregnancy test.
I don't know why you like that on that. Well, it's pregnant or not pregnant.
Yeah, you need 2 bars.
Yeah,
come on.
Although that might be a good project to rip the LCD screen of that, have that maybe attached to a Raspberry Pi.
Shit.
All right, Darth Vader, cool your jets. That's better. All right. So, yeah, there's a pretty high fidelity thing going on there. Nice little screen on a pregnancy test. All right. We covered the Chilean bank, right? Next, we got the border. The border of a country was hacked. And I closed my tab. Oh, maybe this is it. Yep, there it is. So Argentina's border, right, was shut down for 4 hours because of ransomware. So the government in Argentina is refusing to negotiate with a ransomware group that forced them to briefly close all immigration checkpoints. So a group, Netwalker, they make ransomware. They breached Argentina's immigration agency, and they wanted $2 million to restore their servers. Yeah, it's really not that out of the ordinary nowadays, unfortunately. They wanted a lot of money for this, though, roughly $4 million at the time of the posting. You know, price of Bitcoin fluctuates a lot. So going forward, they reported that the attack happened, and because of it, they halted all border crossings into the country for 4 hours. They shut down their computers that were used by immigration people and regional checkpoints, and they say they will not negotiate with hackers, which I guess is good. I like when they don't pay the ransom, because that just encourages these guys to keep doing it. So they're restoring their shit, likely from backups. If not, maybe they're just rebuilding it. But they're not going to pay, and I'm always happy to hear that. Screw paying the bad guys. Speaking of the bad guys, some cyber criminals are changing tactics, trying to exploit COVID-19. So, unless you've been living under a rock, you know COVID-19 is the thing going around, the pandemic. And it's the reason we all have to wear masks and shit all the time whenever we go anywhere. This essentially says that threat actors are now heavily focused on issues related to the pandemic in order to launch attacks, such as crafting phishing emails surrounding COVID-19 related topics, even having ransomware and malware that is COVID-19 themed. And going after home networks and IoT devices because they know people are working from home due to COVID. Bitdefender put out a report, and in it says an average of 60% of all received emails were fraudulent in April and June. 4 out of 10 were COVID themed and were automatically tagged as spam through, shit like Gmail and all those wonderful spam guards we have out there in various forms. Just goes on to talk about how criminals are just kind of taking advantage of this. There are a lot of DNS hijacking attacks targeting popular brands of home routers that are redirecting victims to malware, serving websites, promising applications, offering up-to-date information about COVID-19 to get them to download stuff. If you hijack somebody's router, I don't know why you'd have to then trick them into downloading something, because at that point you've got access to their network and there's a lot of other shit you could do. But if you're going to redirect people to something, I guess a COVID-19 themed page that they're likely to click on is probably a good idea. There's also a lot of URLs being registered with COVID-19 in the title and subdomains with COVID-19, and all of these are, most of these are phishing shit.
Oh yeah, for a while the big trend was a bunch of news reports from the WHO or the any kind of U.S. health authorities. They were pretending to be those authorities to push COVID-19 data, and that was really common during March and April and May. Probably June and July as well, because if it works, why change it?
Exactly. Next, we've got something from InfoSecurity Magazine. They usually don't have too much good shit on their website, but this week they actually had 2 decent articles. So we're talking about some security researchers are warning users that a popular CMS platform could be used. Essentially, it's got 89 0 days, right? If you don't know what CMS is, if you're like a web developer and you're really lazy and don't want to make a website from scratch, you use a CMS, or use like WordPress is not really a CMS, but people use it like a CMS. There's all different ones. There's Drupal, there's Joomla, there's all sorts of shit out there. Well, if you're using a CMS to make your web page, it's kind of got like a what you see is what you get type design editor built in, and it makes it really easy for the developers to make changes to their web pages without having to actually edit the code. And anyway, so this particular team found out that there are 89 0 days present amongst a bunch of the popular content management platforms, including, of course, WordPress. There's always shit for WordPress. Any given day of the week, you're going to find some shit vulnerability with WordPress that would let you take over a WordPress site. There's a cool tool called WP Scan that you can grab, run it on a Linux box, scan a WordPress instance. It'll tell you what plugins are installed. It'll enumerate all the plugins that they've got and then tell you if any of them have a vulnerability. And a lot of the time, these plugins, which having a content management system where you allow anybody to make a plugin and upload it to a place where anybody can pull down a plugin is just a recipe for disaster. And it's kind of a miracle that WordPress even works at this point, because you've got tons of people running tons of plugins written by inexperienced programmers that have all sorts of security vulnerabilities, and it's a nightmare. So they were able to figure out in this report that there are a shit ton of WordPress vulnerabilities, and a lot of them are 0 days. There's also vulns in Joomla, Drupal, and OpenCart. OpenCart is kind of like a CMS if you want to design a site where you have a checkout thing so people can buy shit, right? So, and there are a lot of plugins for all of these things. So I think the majority of these vulnerabilities actually do come from the plugins like I was talking about, and all of these systems allow users to create their own plugins and upload them so that the community can download them. So, yeah, at any given point, you're going to find a shit ton. It's 40 to 80 exploits in use by just mass hacking bots that are automatically taking shit over. There's arbitrary file upload vulnerabilities on a lot of these. So you can upload something, right? And if you can just have the ability to upload something to a web server, some people think, oh, that's not that bad, right? Well, what if I upload a web shell, right? So I upload a little PHP file. It's got like reverse connection back to my box. So as soon as I load that web page in my browser, like .php or whatever, I get a shell back to my box running as the user that's running your CMS system, right? And then from there, I can just do some privilege escalation, and before you know it, I own the box. So arbitrary file upload vulnerabilities are worse than you would think. And, you know, you upload shells, you're good to go. And even if you can't privilege escalate, you can now just kind of fuck with the site because you can own it. You know, you can change content on it. Or if you're a slick bad guy, you'll just inject some malicious code that does something else to everybody who visits the site. Sometimes they'll put like a crypto miner in there. So as long as you're on that web page, the crypto miner is using your CPU and some JavaScript tomfuckery to mine some cryptocurrency. There's all sorts of stuff bad guys can do if they can own your server, right? So it's best to avoid the possibility of an arbitrary file upload thing going on. So the article just talks about there's all sorts of vulnerabilities and dorks you can use. If you don't know what a dork is, there's a concept called Google dorking, and it can be applied.
I have several on the stream right now.
What?
I have several dorks on the stream right now.
Exactly. But Google dorking is the ability to manipulate a search engine so that you can search for a specific type of content that it might not normally be geared towards serving up. So maybe a Google dork would let you find an exposed web camera on the internet, and then you could look at somebody's webcam in their house without, you know, they're knowing that you're doing that, or all sorts of shit you can find with Google dorks. You can like maybe find somebody's password file, or like you can find some obscure config file that's got an encrypted password in it that you know how to decrypt.
It used to be fun to look for printers, especially Rico 7s, and then see if they use this onboard storage to store some documents with sensitive information, like
things have an FTP server. There's a thing. There was actually a thing a few weeks ago. I don't know if I put in the show notes that week or not, but somebody had gone around and they essentially mapped. They wrote a script and they pulled down results from Shodan for a whole bunch of exposed printers, and then that script just printed out to all those printers, letting them know that their printer was exposed to the internet. And they argued that they titled the article about like a sensationalist thing, like how I hacked thousands of printers to let their owners know that they were vulnerable. But you didn't hack their printer; it was exposed to the internet, and you printed to it. That's hacking a printer. You know?
There was a certain guy who sent, let's say, offensive material to a bunch of printers once a few years back because he found all of them and just basically. I guess he sent a PostScript file to everyone's port.
I remember that. Was that Weave who was?
Yes.
Yeah. He actually posted the exact script he and command line just used to send it all to his printers. He pretty much made the argument that it's no good anymore to just spam offensive crap because people are kind of inoculated to that. They'll just throw it out as edgelord shit. You have to make it look like semi-believable. So that's why he put Stormfront recruitment posters of swastikas.
Shit. Yeah, I've heard.
There was also another guy who did the same bullshit for that popular YouTuber. What the hell's that guy's name? He's like number 1 on YouTube.
PewDiePie?
Yeah. They spammed thousands of printers with like vote for PewDiePie on some poll.
It was subscribed to PewDiePie.
Yeah. That's great.
Which, unfortunately, because of other things, people have taken that meme to be something bad that it's not. It's just a certain edgelord went nuts and killed a bunch of people, and you have to use that meme.
In his manifesto, he used a bunch of memes. One of them was subscribe to PewDiePie, and understandably, it kind of unnerved PewDiePie that someone killed 45 people
And
invoked his name.
Radicalized by Candace Owens. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Candace Owens is just.
I have multiple feelings about it, but yeah.
She's nuts.
Okay, we'll discuss that offline if you want.
Sure.
All right, so next we're going to be talking about how in China they're using GitHub to communicate with the rest of the world, letting them know about all the free speech violations and bullshit going on in China and all the crap that's going on there. Because essentially China's walled off for most of the internet, right? There's a few websites they can get to that the rest of the web can get to. So they're kind of using GitHub as an intermediary so that they can, convey messages to the rest of the people about what's going on in China, because GitHub is one of the few sites that you can upload to in China without any fear of the government coming to fuck with you. And so they're essentially taking advantage of that.
That's not going to last much longer. Like when Microsoft bought out GitHub, I saw Microsoft employees saying, in response to criticisms about Microsoft censoring stuff, that the one area they can credibly see Microsoft censoring content in is say in China threatening Microsoft's non-GitHub business interests if Microsoft does not have certain content censored on GitHub.
Right.
Because currently China's not going to ban GitHub, no way, no how.
Yeah, if they ban GitHub, they're just shooting themselves in the foot.
But they can absolutely hurt Microsoft in other ways.
Right. So like you're saying, they're probably going to push Microsoft to try and censor some of these blogs that are talking about things that are happening in China that are maybe not so good, because China doesn't want the rest of the world to know about those things. So it goes on. It talks about how for China, a lot of people have to use GitHub because they use it for work, they use it for school, they use it for all sorts of shit. So censoring it is not probably the best idea. The same thing with like LinkedIn. It goes on. Article talks about how a lot of platforms, Google, Twitter, Facebook, those are all censored, right? You can't get to them, but you can get to GitHub. So they might be trying to censor individual GitHub URLs in the future, which that's one way to do it. He says, I guess we are all just playing boundary ball. He says a common phrase in China that means getting close as possible to the bounds of what is permissible without crossing the line. Yeah. Interesting. Like I'm surprised people in China don't just set up like a server in Azure or something and then proxy all their traffic through it if they want to get through the firewall.
Domain fronting used to be a thing, and Google used to allow it until Google's management found out it was being done, and they thought, we don't want to be the intermediary. We don't want to be the point of, what's it called? Signal was using Google domain fronting in order to allow people in authoritarian regimes to use Signal without, the domain saying Signal on the TLS cert. And Google decided this is a matter for international relations. This is not a matter for Google. So, and they disabled that functionality. And I
still do domain fronting. I see people doing that with Cobalt Strike just so that they can hide their payload shit, like hide the source of it. We'll still do it.
Yeah. So I guess that could be done on a small scale. Yeah, I guess that could be done.
Yeah.
By the way, doesn't China mandate any kind of cloud anything that is being done by a Chinese citizen have their servers located within China?
They probably do. I think there's some things with the rules that they've set up as far as what you can and can't do. And I think one, you can't use certain versions of HTTPS, like SSL type shit.
Well, you can, but they have to have the key for it. So if you encrypt it, they have to have the key for it.
Or they have to have a cert on your box. I don't know if they mandate that.
Some do that, yeah.
Logistically, that would work pretty well if you mandate the citizens to install a cert on their boxes. Maybe you can't access the internet unless you have this cert installed, and then they can man in the middle any HTTPS traffic.
Yeah, I've heard multiple cases of like someone going on with like a VPN that they didn't give the Chinese government the cert to, and like 30 minutes they have to cops the door, banging on the door like, hey. So like they monitor that shit and they will find you if you do it.
It's craziness. Like I get a lot of hits from China on my IDS, and like they're trying to hack into SSH boxes and various shit. So there's people in China who are hacking stuff. It's just whether or not they're state sponsored or not.
Oh, I mean, it's probably compromised. It's probably botnets and shit, but they don't give a fuck about that.
Yeah. But I mean, if you were a Chinese person and you wanted to get away with shit, you would maybe disguise your traffic to look like it's part of a botnet. It'd be kind of clever.
Yeah, but sending the initial commands will be the issue there.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting topic. Next, we're going to be talking about industrial control systems. If you know about SCADA and ICS systems, they're things that drive a lot of the manufacturing and critical infrastructure in a lot of countries, and a lot of plants and a lot of different industries. They deal with ICS shit, right? It's kind of tends to be old software running in a segmented network that usually doesn't have internet access and doesn't get updates, and you're like running a whole bunch of old crap that maybe controls some computer that controls manufacturing for something, or all sorts of shit ICS does. And well, researchers are warning that there are some vulnerabilities in third-party components used by top ICS vendors like Rockwell Automation and Siemens. These are companies that make the shit that goes into the ICS plants. And there's this flaw in a program called CodeMeter, which is owned by another company called Wibu Systems. And this software management component is licensed to a lot of ICS software vendors, and they include it in their software. And CodeMeter lets them have tools to supposedly bolster security, help with licensing models, and protect against piracy and reverse engineering. But this software itself has some vulnerabilities in it that would allow attackers to take control of these systems if they're able to talk to them in any way. There's this CVE 2020-14519 that enables management of licenses via JavaScript. And you can exploit a flaw here, either by a phish or by socially engineering a victim to maybe victims to lure them to a site they control. One attack scenario would be an attacker targets a specific group of engineers looking for advice on a forum dedicated to PLCs by hosting a malicious payload on a phony or compromised forum. Once the targets visit the attacker-controlled website, the threat actors use JavaScript to inject malicious licenses of their own into the target's machine. So this would kind of be like a cross-site scripting vulnerability where you have to get them to visit a web page, and then once they're on that web page, if they have the software logged in, like they have another tab open and they're doing something on that platform, you can kind of control what it's like, stealing their cookies and all that shit, but you're able to control the system as them, take over their session. It's interesting shit. There's also a buffer overflow they found in CodeMeter that's got a 10 out of 10, making it a critical vulnerability. So if you've got actual access to one of these things, maybe you're on the same LAN somehow, you could buffer overflow it and gain a root on it. Fuck with shit. You can chain a bunch of these vulnerabilities together. There's some other ones. There's the license file one. There's one that lets you shut down a system remotely. Yeah, there's a bunch of these different vulnerabilities for CodeMeter, and chaining them together will let you completely own the system. Could have dire implications. A lot of these systems do some very important tasks. Like, for instance, like in a natural gas facility, right? Imagine you were able to control one of these things and you could maybe make the facility blow up, right? There's all sorts of wicked shit you could do if you were able to compromise ICS systems that run this shit.
I mean, that was, I think, one of the things in Die Hard 4 where they redirected gas flow to build up pressure, make it blow up. Which, I mean, depending on how the SCADA system works, is theoretically possible, but yeah.
Yeah. Look, if you can get on the same network, there's probably something you can pop, right? So if say it's a natural gas, not natural gas, but whatever. Say it's like a system that controls something that can blow up. I mean, if you can get on that box, you can probably fuck with it. Next thing we've got is coming out of your shell from Slayer to Z-Slayer. So if you don't know what Slayer is, it is some Mac OS X malware. And it's probably the most popular malware on a Mac system, and about 1 out of 4 Mac machines actually have this shit on it. So Slayer, right, isn't going, starts talking about how most recently there was a thing in the news where Slayer accidentally got signed by Apple's code signing certificate, which we talked about last week, where it was essentially you could download this and Apple wouldn't warn you that this is bad software because Apple had signed this software and said it was safe to install despite it being malware. So it talks about how the way a lot of the antivirus programs and a lot of the IDS systems are able to fingerprint Slayer is through a technique it uses where it passes encrypted password protected code to OpenSSL and then writes that payload out to the /temp folder. And that's a way they've kind of fingerprinted. They know that it does that, and you know, it's also heavily obfuscated ZSH scripts that they use. It's telltale signs it's Slayer. Now there's a new variant of Slayer that doesn't do that. This new version comes as a shell executable on a removable DMG disk image. Now, if you've ever used a Mac and you went to go install some software, you know, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can do it from their official app store, but you can also pull down an ISO, the equivalent of an ISO file for Mac, which is a .dmg. And you mount this disk image, right? And now Slayer goes back to the application bundle inside the DMG file. So kind of like the auto run on a Windows ISO. Like if you have a Windows CD and there's an auto run.inf file and you pop the CD in or the ISO file, you load it up and mount it. And as soon as it starts running, Windows starts running the code of whatever that CD has on it, right? So it'll run whatever executables there. So as soon as you mount this DMG file, it's the same kind of process. You are now running the code so you wouldn't normally think of like an ISO file as being something that's executable or a DMG file, but in this case you mount it and then it automatically runs the code that's on there. And once it's running that code, it does some obfuscated ZSH script shit. If you take a look at this, there's some clever shit right here. So the user would not know what the hell is going on here because they've obfuscated the crap out of the code. So if you're looking at it, it doesn't seem to make any sense. The bundle is code signed. That means that it's got a developer signature on it. but it's not notarized, indicating the malware is either intended as a payload for 10.14 or earlier versions of Mac OS X. And they're going to try and socially engineer people to override the notarization check. So, like when you go to install software, it's going to be like, this software is officially from whatever developer. It's safe to install. Well, this doesn't have that, so it's going to warn you instead and be like, are you sure you want to install this software? It's from such and such developer, but it's not signed. And you click OK, and then, yeah. So they include some social engineering in there to get them to actually install it. So some virus scanners are picking this up off the bat, like 3 of them. If you were to upload it to VirusTotal, 6 see it, right? And then they go about decoding the actual payload, where they deobfuscate the script. Once they do that, it's, you can see what the hell the script is doing. And they go all the way through that. And, yeah, look in there. Once they deobfuscate it, it's actually got a hard-coded credentials in the script for the system it's connecting back to. That's always fun, right? You get the creds that the bad guys are using on their systems. Hard-coded creds are never a good idea, even if you're obfuscating them. All right, it goes on, talks about that. All right. Yeah, interesting shit. Always fun to reverse some malware. Slayer to Slayer. Speaking of vulnerabilities and cryptographic shit, what is this new message? Shut up, Sentinel-1. I hate when websites do that. Like you're trying to read an article and a little thing pops up on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. It's like, you've got a new message from some fucking bot that wants to talk to you. That's annoying. Popular Android apps are rife with cryptographic vulnerabilities. Of course they are, right? Because that's what happens with Android apps. All right. So Columbia University researchers have released CryLogger. It is an open source dynamic analysis tool that allows Android app features, which shows Android apps feature cryptographic vulnerabilities. That makes no sense from a language perspective, but anyway, they tested a bunch of Android apps and they put together an open source tool that shows which Android app features have cryptographic vulnerabilities. That makes more sense. CryLogger is incredibly complicated and has an API where it can go out and check if an Android app is doing some bad shit. It goes through recommended usage. Testing under researchers found the dynamic tool. Okay. So they recommend that if you're using something like CryptoGuard, which is an open source static analysis tool for detecting crypto misuses in Java-based applications, that's a freaking mouthful, that you could find out essentially if an app that you're using on Android is doing some crypto no-nos. Yeah. But I found some interesting things. Many apps break too many crypto rules. They ended up emailing 306 developers of Android apps that violate 9 or more crypto rules. They chose not to reveal the names of the vulnerable apps and libraries because they fear that information could benefit attackers. But one of these things was actually a file manager. A password manager. And some of them were authentication and messaging apps. So you'd think crypto would be kind of important in something like a password manager or an authentication app. So don't fuck it up. Bad crypto and Android shit. Emotet, right? Emotet is a precursor to Ryuk. So if you get infected with Emotet and they log in and they check out your shit, right? And they say, oh, you're a high value target, and they're going to pop Ryuk on there.
That's a shame that the Emotep botnet was restored. I know there was an effort to try to disable much of the Emotep botnet. It turns out a lot of people who run it just grabbed some random web shells from the internet, didn't change the default passwords, so the site stayed infected to active C2 servers, but a third of the entirety of all of them got counterpopped, and someone deleted the payload and put up a GIF.
I saw that. It was funny GIFs too, and what they were doing was the payloads that they were using. They essentially overwrote the payload file with random image files that were memes, which I thought was pretty hilarious.
Yes.
So like you go to that site and you type in the payload, and from the end user perspective, they're not going to see that, right? But it's there, and when the bad guys go to check why the hell their shell's not working, they're going to see some random image file if they try and figure out what the hell the file is, which is kind of funny. So yeah. They were using off-the-shelf GitHub scripts that you could just grab to do a web shell with like hard-coded credentials, and people figured that out. And yeah. Regardless, so there's an uptick in this shit again. Emotet's coming back with a vengeance. This guy, Joseph Rusin, a member of Cryptolamius, a group of security researchers who track Emotet, have been saying it's becoming more and more active, especially in 3 countries. New Zealand has been heavily targeted. And it's spreading by emails originating from E3. And E3 is one of these little mini botnets that make up the larger Emotet infrastructure. They're spamming New Zealand with mini botnets, and also Japan. There's giant spam waves leading to a tripling of Emotet signings last week, causing experts to sound an alarm. And they actually have a little alert, little graph they made here of the known Emotet infections here, and it's kind of slow, gets a little bit bigger, kind of falls back down, and then all of a sudden it's skyrocket. It's like 3 times as many installs as there were on like a few days ago even. So infected computers were on the Paris court systems as well. That's always fun when the government court systems get owned by ransomware. They're also going back to their old trick of infecting one victim and then stealing older email threads. And then they use those old threads to forward the payload to other victims, right? So say you're emailing somebody at work, right? And they now have access to your email. They will reply to a thread that's going back and forth and attach their executable. And when the person gets it, they're going to see as if it came from you. So they're going to click it thinking it's from you, and then they're going to get infected. Cool tactic when you think about it.
That actually is pretty smart, yeah, because I mean, you're expecting the email from them, and if you're dealing with something technical, like, oh, here's what you need, I mean, it's gonna that'll bypass a lot of human filters right there. Even people who are actually like pretty wary.
The unique thing about, I think, the Emotet and Ryuk botnet stuff is that they actually go into your system when you get infected, and they will kind of look around and see if you're a worthwhile target that they can make money off of. Like, they actually have a live person do that. It's not all scripted out. And they go in there and they check it out. And they say, like, are you connected to a network? Does that network have a bunch of other computers on it? Does it look like a corporate environment? If so, can we figure out what company it is? You know, then we're going to look at the company and see what kind of business they do and what kind of money they might have. And yeah, they put a lot of legwork into it. You know, it's not just your typical botnet that's spreading blindly, you know?
I mean, yeah, you spread blindly, and you maybe get a 0.1% return rate of which gives you a little money. Whereas if you take your time and look around, you could get a really big target that will pay a lot of money.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. So Jabber. If you don't know what Jabber is a chat protocol put out by Cisco. A lot of hackers like to use Jabber because there's a plugin called Off the Record. And using Jabber with Off the Record pretty much guarantees that your conversation you're having with somebody else is not going to be decrypted ever by anybody else. Kind of like Signal, you kind of put trust in that. Well, a lot of hackers believe Jabber, So this flaw here is an RCE flaw in the Windows Cisco Jabber version, right? So this is the actual messaging application for if you're going to install it on a Windows box. Now, this has a CVSS score of 9.9 out of 10. That means it's very, very bad. And a lot of companies now are switching to Jabber due to the coronavirus shit because they need a secure messaging app that they can talk to their employees with and do inter-office communications. So it's kind of making a resurgence in installations.
I know older versions of it were open source and I think are free, but I don't know if the Cisco version is free or not. It might be just be really, really cheap because it's so old. I know a lot of like big businesses will actually move to use Microsoft version, like they'll use Teams or something like that because those are you'll usually get that as part of your Office bundle from Microsoft. So
right. So Cisco Jabber, there is an open source implementation of it. It's pretty easy to actually set up. There's a whole bunch of different open source implementations you can throw up your own chat server. I actually used to run my own chat server for me and a few of my friends, and we all. The one thing with Jabber, you can do off the record between two people, but when you get three people, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Right? So you can have it in like a group chat, but if you're messaging somebody directly, you can.
I think Jabber actually started as open source, and then I think Cisco bought them out like a couple years ago and still developed it as their thing because the Jabber protocol it's all XMPP based, right? And that was like open source standard. But I think now it's like developed by
some of their Cisco phones actually have Jabber built in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So regardless, this is on the official Jabber, like the Windows client. So this is not like the Pigeon or any of the third-party programs you can download and access Jabber. This is for actual Windows boxes running the Jabber client, right? You can get cross-site script. You can get RCE on that box if you are able to talk to that box. And so essentially you got to be on the same network, right? It's not like going to work over the internet unless they're directly on the internet. So if you want to pop up somebody who's got Cisco Jabber, you got to be on their same network. If you're on the same network and maybe you see the Cisco Jabber port is exposed on their computer, you can then run an exploit and get a shell on that computer. All right. So it's kind of cool. It's not the Jabber server, it's the actual client. So you can also not run the official Jabber client, right? You can run multiple other versions, open source implementations, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, probably not the biggest exploit out there, but it's still one. And it's could be useful in your toolkit if you're doing a pen test and you're already on the client network. Now, any one of those clients who's running the Jabber chat app on their computer, you can just get on there, That's neat. So, next, we've got social media, thwarting the phishing data goldmine. So how much information do you put about yourself on social media?
Too much, apparently.
Yeah, definitely too much. Everybody does, I think, nowadays. Like a lot of OSINT tools can pull all sorts of interesting data about people from your online profiles. Like if you're, say, rocking Facebook and you accept a friend request from some rando, you think, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, this rando now sees my my profile and my pictures of my cat and all this shit. But there are tools out there that you can use to maybe grab info about your friends. There are certain tools you can run that will give you your friends' emails, and if they have a phone number associated with their Facebook account, you can get that phone number, even if they don't publicly expose that phone number, right? So there's lots of shit you can do with social media and grabbing tons of info about people. So social media is connecting people with the real world. Well, people you know in the real world. A lot of people connect with anybody they kind of know, or acquaintances on social media, even if they're not really friends. And the more people you kind of add and give access to your shit, the bigger your kind of profile is out there, your exposure. So what's happening, for example, is remember the spear phishing that went on Twitter, right? Remember the kid who's like this 17-year-old guy. He's using basic hacking techniques, and essentially he's finding some high-profile Twitter accounts, and then he spear phishes them and gets access to those accounts and posts some cryptocurrency scam, right? Remember that? He was able to spoof the Twitter employee's phone number through SIM swapping. You don't know what SIM swapping is? That's where you're able to kind of take over somebody's phone number and get the text messages that are meant to go to them. And once he was able to do that, he was able to do those one-time password multi-factor authentication questions, because now he's the phone number that they're checking with, right? So MFA and OTPs are not necessarily enough, especially with platforms like Twitter. If they can verify you by your phone number, but your phone number can be taken over, that means your account can be taken over. So you got to kind of approach this from a zero trust model, make people use third-party MDM tools like, MDM being mobile device management. Zero trust model, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Anyway, that's the last regular story we've got for today's cast. We have some shit and other shit because it's shit. This is something that I came across I thought was cool. It's a keyboard made to look and feel like the old keyboards. I want to get one of these when they come out. I'm not spending, I don't know how much, $9.99 HKD. It's $129 USD. That's a lot of money for a keyboard. Probably not going to spend that much. I go on eBay and I find old keyboards and buy them because I'm weird like that.
Yeah, I how to put it this way. It was some that I had that were being thrown out of school, and so I pulled them out of hazmat and kept them. Old IBM Model M keyboards.
Those are nice.
I still have a couple of them, I think, but none I want to spare. And I have a bunch of partials, but I have so many that are missing various keys. Like the escape key, I think, was the one that was most missing. You could sometimes find replacements online, but
this is the keyboard right here. It's the best one. This is the Model M IBM keyboard. They're like the best keyboard you can get. This thing just lasts forever. I had one of these a while back. I love the best keyboard.
I enjoy them too.
The Model M was great. They have a bunch of iterations of it. Some of them even have that Windows key on the bottom now. This one was cool too. This is one of the Model M's with the different keycaps. Anyway, keyboards. I miss old school keyboards. That's your first thing and other shit. Next, we have a thing about Bitcoin wallet. So there's this wallet file, right? And if you're on the Bitcoin software on your computer, the wallet software, there's like a wallet.dat file, right? And that wallet.dat file has all the information about what Bitcoins you've got and their addresses and shit. So hackers have been trading this encrypted wallet for a while. Nobody can break into it, but it's got 690 million in it apparently. So if somebody can break into it, they're going to get a lot of Bitcoin, unless here it's possible somebody forged this wallet and they made it look like it's got a lot of Bitcoin in it by taking the address here, right? And just replacing whatever address was in there with this one that's got a lot of money on it. If you were to check the actual blockchain, So it could just be they replaced that wallet address with this one, and it's a fake wallet. But you're not going to know until they break into it, and that might take many, 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 many years. It's apparently got at least a 15-character password that seems to be alphanumeric. It hasn't been cracked yet, and a lot of people are attempting to crack it, and some people are even spinning up cloud resources with graphics cards and trying to crack it, but no luck. What the hell is this like? Video playing bottom right. What did I click? Oh, here we go. Okay. Come on. Maximize. Is this what I wanted? That's not what I wanted. Come on. All right, let's reload this page because it seems to...
Falanges, falanginas, falangetas son articulaciones porque permiten el movimiento de los dedos de la mano. Y esas son articulaciones. La muñeca, los hombros, obviamente ya no el cuello.
Están robando a la...
Están robando en la casa de la Majo.
¿En la casa de la Majo?
¿Dónde? Están robando en la casa de la Majo.
Alguien que llame
rápido a la policía. Llame, policía. Llame. ¿Y cuál es el dirección o algo? Sí, ¿dónde?
Yeah, so if you didn't catch that, somebody was in a Zoom meeting for school, and they got robbed live while their classmates watched. Somebody broke into their house and stole their shit. And that's pretty fucking scary. Yeah, man. In the middle of a Zoom class, just mind your own business, going to school, and some assholes break into the house and rob you. And your whole class gets to see it. That's where we're living nowadays.
I mean, we were already in that world. Now we just see it happening because, you know, everyone's on Zoom.
Mm-hmm. This article is kind of stupid, but I put it in here just for shits and giggles because a lot of people don't understand the importance of securing Active Directory accounts against password attacks. Now, what do I mean by a password attack, right? So a lot of people have what they think are unique passwords, right? So they will use only this password in this place and not use it other places. And that's good. If you do that, that's good, as you know, but a lot of people will take their password and use it everywhere. So they use the same password across multiple platforms, right? And what happens, something gets breached, and a hacker takes that password and tries it on the other services that person has. And now they've got access to all of their shit because they use the same password for everything. That's one thing that is like bad password hygiene, right? Happens a lot. Another bad password thing would be to maybe add a number or a letter to the end of the same password when you have to change your password. So your password was password, your new password's password 1, and everything else password 2. And it's just, that's not good. It's not good security hygiene, bad. You should also be changing it every 90 days. Yeah, it happens. A lot of people don't change their passwords ever.
They've actually kind of found that changing it that frequently is not that good because you're going to tend to forget it or you're going to start following the bad habits. So changing it, like, say, you know, every 6 months to a year is better.
All right. So we also have NIST Special Publication 800-63B, which talks about how to pick a good password, right? It goes all through there, and some other good shit about just, you know, that kind of stuff. So, come on, stupid thing. All right. The data breaches happen more and more often, and people are going to reuse passwords when they find them online, and they're going to try those passwords against your employees. So you should also not have anything. Right. So here's a good one that's not in this article. A lot of people will be like, yeah, our exchange is 2-factor authentication. It's great. And like everything that's internet facing requires multiple factors of authentication so that bad guys cannot test out usernames and passwords. And everybody's like, oh, that's great. But then they have an IMAP server up, right? And IMAP doesn't require any second factor and it will let you hammer at it as much as you want. So what the bad guys do is they take their username and password list and they just spray against the IMAP server. And then they get a bunch of valid accounts. And once they know they've got valid accounts, they go through other ways of fucking around and getting past two-factor. Anyway, that's just one of the things I thought I'd mention. Compromised passwords are the biggest thing, right? So a lot of companies subscribe to services that let them know if their employees' passwords have been compromised. Now, they usually do that just by monitoring these services for the emails of their employees because they wouldn't actually know their employees' passwords unless they're using reversible encryption, which would be very bad. There are some Active Directory plugin tools like Enzoic for AD. This will check the password both when it's created and when it's reset against daily real-time compromised password data breaches, right? So if you're using a password other people have used, it ain't going to let you use that one. That could be a real pain in the ass for your users because there's only so many passwords people have to think of. And it's going to result in them coming up with some very long, very complicated passwords that while they are probably going to be secure, they are also not going to remember.
Again, that comes to the problem. Every 90 days you have to change it, and then, oh crap, what is it now? By the time you remember it, you gotta change it again.
Exactly. So it's a minefield trying to figure out a way to secure this shit so that users are not going to reuse the same password they use elsewhere, and it's not fun. I would not want to be a sysadmin anymore, and I'm glad I'm not. Most of them don't even give a shit about security, though. So this article's about how crypto has lost its soul. Why did they make crypto in the first place? Why did they come out with Bitcoin? It was supposed to be an alternative to the traditional banking structure, right? It's supposed to be an alternative way that we could send people money and not have the government and the banking industry involved in that transaction. But as they're showing, the financial crisis that has been destructive, and also the government has removed the limit on FDIC deposit insurance. That's interesting. Anyway, they're talking about how crypto has essentially lost its soul because it's now being used by the banking industry and the government, which means it's not the intention. The original intention of having it where it's an alternative payment not used by governments and banks. It's now just another payment, right? It's another way to pay for shit. So
I gotta get Nathan's view on this. Unfortunately, he can't. For some reason, he always texts from his phone and can't connect to StreamYard, apparently. My thought process on that is, fuck that. Who cares if the government's using it as long as it's not controlled by any central authority?
Well, yes, it might not be controlled by any central authority, but as we regulate crypto, right? Like in New York,
okay.
If you have Bitcoin in New York, they want to know how much you have on your taxes. And you also are supposed to have a license to be able to trade Bitcoin, although I don't think anybody really does that.
Well, there's some places you just don't live, like New York and California.
Right. So like I have Bitcoin, right? I live in New York, and on my taxes, there's a thing I have to put how much Bitcoin I got.
That said, if you move to a state like Indiana from California and New York, leave your fucking politics behind.
Mm-hmm. Regardless, the regulating cryptocurrencies is a big thing now. There are banks that are backed by cryptocurrencies at this point instead of the gold standard, which is really scary when you think about how often cryptocurrencies fluctuate.
Well, nothing's backed by the gold standard. It hasn't been for 100 years now.
I know a lot of places are actually backed by the price of gasoline. and that really hurt them when the price went down.
Well, no, if they're using the U.S. dollar, they're backed upon the faith a bit. That's the whole point of fiat currency.
Barrels of oil are only traded in U.S. dollar for some reason.
Probably because it's the standard currency of the world for trade.
Yeah. Regardless. Apple iCloud, Google Drive, and Dropbox are being probed on unfair cloud storage practices. What is an unfair cloud storage practice, may you ask? Well, according to the competition authority in Italy, otherwise known as the ACGM, Apple, iCloud, Google, and Dropbox are engaging in unfair commercial practices. And
now, look at who is not on that list. What is the elephant in the room that's missing there?
Microsoft?
Bingo. I bet you any amount of money that Microsoft is behind this.
Yeah.
They probably lobbied Italy to just go after every single one of their major competitors.
I mean, to be fair, isn't OneDrive kind of the little guy as far as I was concerned?
No, it's one of the biggest ones there is.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're essentially talking about how the services are failing to provide in a clear and immediate accessible manner information about how users can get out of their contracts, including exercising the right to reconsider. The companies are also being investigated for not allowing users access to out-of-court dispute settlement mechanisms, whatever the fudge that means, giving them an easier way to deal with complaints. The other investigations are dealing with how all three companies, including their right to suspend services for users, liability exemptions, even in the event of loss of documents stored in the user's cloud space. They are not responsible if they lose your shit. The possibility of unilateral modification of contractual conditions, I don't know what the hell that means, that's lawyer speak, and the prevalence of the English version of the contract, but not an Italian one. So maybe they just need to hire a translator. None of the three companies have responded to the charges. Crackdown. I'm going to stupid article. Let's talk about Blackbaud. So last week we talked about Blackbaud a little bit. They are a company a lot of nonprofits use, and they will outsource their database shit to Blackbaud so they don't have to design it and use it themselves. They essentially get the use of a database and the functionality without the need to design it or maintain it. They just pay a monthly fee, and Blackbaud handles that shit. So a nice use case might be a hospital that would keep its donor database in a Blackbaud cloud thing, and if you wanted to maybe input a new donor, you just go into the cloud and you got a nice web interface, and you just put your information in there and update the database. Multiple people can do it at the same time. It's all great. It's all functional. And they got owned, and multiple nonprofits had all of their data that was stored on Blackbaud leaked to the hackers who took it. So tons and tons of hospitals, tons of nonprofits, tons of agents, tons of similar type businesses all had their databases they used for various different things leaked. There's actually a hospital near me called North Shore, LIJ, and they had their database of patients leaked, and I'm in it. So yeah, it's a lot of different databases leaked altogether. So they say there are no social security numbers in this information, but look, if you're going to let the banks, not the banks, what the hell am I saying? If you're going to let the hospitals design their own database, right, they can store whatever the hell information they want in those databases. So what's stopping them from putting a field that says social security number, right? But they're claiming that there is no evidence that social security numbers were leaked in this breach, despite it being composed of multiple databases from multiple hospitals and nonprofits. So I guess that's the upside. A lot of different places were in this breach. This talks about a few of them, like some place in North Dakota and some alumni associations and various other things. But look, this was a huge database leak. Like, there's a ton of data in this. And yeah, I haven't seen it on raid forums yet, so that's probably a good sign. But there's a lot of data out there now that the hackers got access to. So there's that. Next, we've got mapping the motives of insider threats. So you own a company and you've got a bunch of employees, and most of them seem pretty satisfied. And then one day, one of your employees decides to give your database of trade secrets to a competitor because the competitor gave them some money, right? That's your typical, what we think of as like a use case for an insider threat. But they actually come in a lot of different forms. They don't always come as something so obvious and like necessarily scary. Sometimes you just have like an idiot employee who doesn't follow your basic security protocols and gets themselves hacked, and then the hackers use their access to get all your shit. Sometimes we have threats that stem from a mistake. Other times it's a personal vendetta. Like they figure out they're going to get let go soon, and they decide to either fuck with your network or steal your data or do all sorts of bad things. Sometimes insider threats can cost more than $300K to fix. Other times they cost more than $800K when they're criminal and malicious things. One actually cost $871,000 that involved some credential theft, right? So unlike common attacks, insider attacks are rarely smash and grab. The longer the threat goes undetected, the more damage they can do in your organization. The better you understand your people, their motivations, and their relationships with your data and networks, the earlier you can detect common potential threats. So back when I was a systems administrator, I was very concerned about security stuff because I was always interested in security, and I set up verbose logging on my domain controllers and had those logs forwarded to another box that I would go through periodically and look at. And I saw one day that one of the other systems administrators, one of the junior guys, had, from what the logs looked like, set up a new domain controller and performed a sync. The problem being we didn't have any new domain controllers, so something was up, right? So I investigated and I remoted to the dude's box, and there I found a text file called dcdump.txt, and in there was everybody in the domain's username and hash of their password. And what I was later able to figure out through some investigation was that this guy had been futzing around with Mimikatz and was playing with PowerShell Empire and had intentionally infected his own box with Empire. I don't know if infected is the right word, but essentially he popped his own box and from a Linux VM on his box pulled down a whole shit ton of info from his actual box, and then for some reason copied it over to a folder that was on the main box. I don't know what his motivations were, but if I hadn't been watching the logs, which most sysadmins don't, I wouldn't have seen it. And God knows what he was going to do with that list of usernames and hashes, because he could have either passed the hash and been anybody, or he could have cracked it and had everybody's password and done shit as other people. But I brought it up with the head guy, and that guy was let go a few days later, and everybody was forced to do a password reset. So yeah, that's story time with Frank about insider shit that goes on.
Remember, 50% of your threats are from the inside.
Yeah, man, you'd be surprised. This was just a guy who was interested in security, and he decided, you know what, I'm going to play with PowerShell Empire, and I'm going to get everybody's username and hash. And I don't know why you would do that if you're a domain administrator, right? You've already got a lot of power. You can pretty much do anything you want. There's no reason to use a DC sync unless you're planning on doing something bad with that info. You know, it's what it is.
Yeah, even if you're ultimately innocuous, it does raise a lot of uncomfortable questions to see that.
Yeah, it was a scary thought. Like, I did a remote into his machine just using like the SMB thing with the $C, right? And I'm looking at the folders there, and he had a whole bunch of like hacking tools. And first I thought his box got popped, right? I'm like, oh shit, we got somebody popped the sysadmin. This is going to be horrible. It turned out it was him. There's the fucking guy. And I figured that out was because he had a freaking backtrack VM on his system. And if you've got that, you're obviously, it's not a bad actor who's going to go in your box and install VirtualBox and make his own freaking backtrack VM. It's not the typical way threat actors work. So that was fun. That was when I decided I really wanted to get into security and not just do sysadmin shit anymore. And I figured that shit out. It was a good day. All right. So there's also espionage, sabotage, malicious insiders. And it talks about defending from within. And one of the big things about defending from within is knowing what the hell's going on in your network, which requires some kind of SOC, right? So if you don't have a SOC, get a SOC. Or outsource it. Just watch shit. Watch the logs. Watch all the shit. Okay. And I guess you don't have an article for interesting spam patterns for some reason?
No, I don't, because it's something I've kind of noticed. I haven't seen an article on it. Maybe it's just something I've noticed. I've seen some anti-spam is kind of something that's kind of a pet project of mine, and I'm seeing some interesting patterns that are very, very peculiar in how they're adapting to tactics. So I've seen a lot of newsletter signups being used to send spam out. Someone will sign up for a newsletter with like a bit.ly URL as your name. So you'll get a letter like, hello, bit.ly / whatever, for usually it's dating spam, which is probably malicious as shit. I actually haven't opened one of them because I'm not stupid. But yeah, it's interesting. And it comes from all over. It seems like they're just very indiscriminately using these people who are hosting newsletters. I've seen from a French farming group. I've seen from a BMW dealer group in Germany, including big companies too, like Gumtree and Stanley Black & Decker. And again, it just sounds like they're taking advantage of these companies having newsletter signups that don't sanitize inputs to send spam out on their behalf, because they're getting a free email out saying, hey, thank you for signing up for our newsletter. Here's a URL, because people are going to click on URLs who are stupid, I guess. And yeah, I'm amazed that this is still a thing in this day and age. I mean, this is basic form sanitization stuff. This is how you prevent, SQL injections and a lot of XSS attacks. So sanitize your fucking inputs, fuckos.
That'd be too much work. Just one sec. Shit. Man. So I ordered an e-bike, right? Because I'm lazy. I don't like to pedal. I'm fat, right? So I was told it was going to be in like November. They were going to ship it. So I'd have like a month in October where I'd be able to ride it maybe into November. Figured that'd be great, It's like nice and cool out. I can ride the bike around. Now they're telling me it ain't going to be here till late October. And that sucks. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah. No, there's lots of shipping delays around the world now, especially in the U.S. I mean, I assume that this is some kind of e-bike made. Is it made in China and imported, or is it like U.S. made?
It's Rad Power Bikes. I'm not sure where they are based out of.
It's probably something imported from China, and yeah, there's been lots of import delays because of various fears and whatnot, and all that kind of shit. So, yeah.
I'm curious for something. How come my show notes look different yours? Because I went through and corrected all that Roman numeral underneath the letter stuff, and it didn't show.
Mine is in view mode. Yours is in edit mode.
Ah,
So like if I go view here, I'm in print layout, right? I can go mode, editing, and then nothing happens. Okay. All right. And then this is now it's
a few more. Oh, those ones I left Roman numeral because it's several links together. I don't have one particular style. I was just consolidating.
with Google Drive, viewing and editing shows things two different ways. I don't understand it, but it's stupid. So next and last, we have what would happen if all your personal data leaked online. All right, so I read this article and I had a thought immediately as I was reading it. Watched this really bad like B movie on Netflix a while ago called Assassination Nation. And it is about this small town in the South where this girl, her all of like everybody's personal information in this town is leaked at once. Like who's having an affair with who is doing what. Some hacker gets into like everybody's shit and leaks everybody's things, right? And the main character is this girl, and everybody thinks she's the one who did it for some reason. And the town just descends into chaos, and like it becomes kind of like it's a crazy movie where it's like survivalist type shit where you know she's trying to survive and everybody's trying to kill her. It's crazy. It's a great movie for a B movie, you know. But the article that I was reading is called "What Would Happen if All Your Data Leaked at Once," and I think the guy who wrote this article probably saw that movie or saw the other movie that I linked. So. Subconsciously on some level, we're all waiting for it to leak that wrecks society and confirms what we all know already, that the mass transfer of our most innermost secrets and shames to Facebook and Google was not going to end in flames. It goes on. It's a fun read. It's not like, oh, this is the best article I've ever read, but it's, you know, interesting. It talks about like what would happen, right? So it goes on. How scary it would be if like everybody knew your deepest, darkest secrets all of a sudden, and like everybody had to go out and, you know, redo all their bank accounts and everything because everything was compromised. Like everybody could get into everybody's shit, and how scary that would be. And it talks about, say the information is actually indexed and it can be searched, and how scary that would be. That somebody would probably try to DDoS whatever system was holding all this data. And then like all financial secrets would be out there, like everybody's bank account, and all that would come to a grinding halt because anybody could get into anybody's bank account. And then it talks about how every human on the planet would be busy reestablishing their identity and financial info and crypto keys and all that stuff. It's scary shit. So there's that. There's this movie, Assassination Nation, which is a fun watch, like I was talking about, which is that's the concept. Everybody knows everybody's shit. And then there's this movie. There's actually a book, I think, maybe a movie. Yeah, it was a novel by Arthur C. Clarke that I have not read, but has a really interesting concept where somebody develops wormhole technology that lets people see information that's happened previously at different points in the space-time continuum. So essentially being able to open up a window and see, not a real window, like a virtual window, and see what happened for real at any point in time to anybody. So scary thought right there. Like you could be like a time viewer and see what happened. It goes on and talks about how scary that would be and how all the religions would need to reevaluate. And in the book, Jesus actually turns out to be the illegitimate son of a Roman centurion. Moses turns out to actually not have existed and be based on multiple people. And then they go on and talks about how they look at the very beginning of Earth and figure out that it was seeded by aliens. You know, in this book, which is interesting concept-wise. I might actually read it. Yeah, and eventually they learn how to use this technology to bring back dead people. So, interesting read. Might check it out. I digress. It is, and that I actually stole from Paul's Security Weekly because I saw it on there and it was interesting, and I put it on here. So that's that. I'm done talking. I did everything I want to do. I talked about all the shit. I got nothing left. We're done. Done. What are you still watching this for? Don't you have other things to do?
Yeah. Does anybody have any parting words?
Not really.
Well, we love you all and see you all next Wednesday.
Later.